Hi, this is Dr. Scott, and today we're going to get into several questions. Here's one of the things that happened. Our chat channel, our chat room has got 31K in there. If you don't know what that is, it's right below here. You'll see the chat, okay, or the main channel of 31,000 in there. The chat channel had like 5,600. We wanted to keep it really, tight and not have everyone fighting and saying crazy things. But it took us so much time to keep up with, we just couldn't do it anymore. I mean, my wife more specifically had been working at it 6 hours a day. We just can't do that. So we made the kind of decision to close that chat channel, but we do have an opportunity for you to, ask questions. So that's what we're trying to do. We will, periodically kind of throw out an email that you can kind of do and check that out with that too. But you can ask questions right down here below. Okay, so let's let's do this first one. This is actually pulled out from several questions, and I'll show you more about that with that too. So, why Janine asked a good question, and by the way, this is two or three different people doing that. Why are banks operating as just as usual, as if business is everything, nothing's changed, right? I see people that they know about the NESARA piece, they know about what's potentially going to happen, but they act like, I mean, when they walk into these banks, they act like nothing's happening. So a couple things that I might say, and we'll expand this a little bit more as we go along here. A couple things that you got to watch. Listen, if a bank is about to go through a radical change that would cause so many more questions than you can possibly answer, because it's not just your bank doing this. Like if you were going to make, if I as a small business was going to make a change, I would roll out that change. And I'm going to give you an example. Last year, about the same time frame, I spent, for my practice, it was a really important thing. I spent $23,000. It took like 2.5 months to put together a piece of software that would radically transform the way that we processed and helped patients to hear and understand. It was a very big investment that I did in my practice. Okay, I mean, I took money out of my own pocket over and over again to do this. So, but did I share that with anyone? I mean, other than my staff, did I share that we were going to do that? No. Um, I never would, because then they would ask questions about it, and I'm not ready to get into that conversation yet, right? And that's just me as a small private practice. We're larger than a lot of other places, but we're not, anything huge necessarily. But what if you are maybe a tier two bank, maybe $1 billion? You're probably not going to tell anyone anything. You might say, next week, we're launching our new updated software. And by the way, banks have been doing this left and right, and you haven't even noticed how they're doing it. Secondly, if the change is coming from way behind you, meaning the Fed banks, what in the world can we do about that kind of thing? And so what happens here is they can't share that because they've got to wait until everyone does it. Because if this bank does it and that bank doesn't do it, then no one's going to make any sense with that. Okay. So, there's another kind of a part here. Why are they still giving out loans and acting like the QFS isn't about to occur? So, for instance, if you're a bank and you have no idea the date this is going to happen, are you going to not do any business whatsoever? I mean, are you not going to be able to, do a home loan or a car loan or a short-term loan for someone who has a need? What, are you going to fire all of your employees that do that? You see, what if that happened back in 2020? Then banks would have closed down, and they weren't ready, meaning the White Hats really weren't ready for this thing to occur. So you can't do it. You have to operate as business all the way up until the last day. There was a company, and it'll make more sense. Wells Fargo informed me September 16th, I think it was, that they were no longer going to do these short-term type of loans. And I was fascinated by it. I mean, I got a letter about it, which is totally fine, right? Then I got an email about it. And guess what? I even got the sales guy calling me on the phone telling me about this. And we'd used them a lot, in my practice. And I'm like, dude, like I already understand what's going on, but why was a salesperson calling about it like that we're closing and don't you have other sources? I'm like, yeah, but what does it matter to you? You guys are closing, right? You see, that was a huge kind of change for them. And don't think that it's not in the back of their minds. And they're hearing this kind of stuff. They can't really answer all that stuff. You got to operate the same way no matter what until until that change comes. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of those differences. So for instance, I want you to think about the big old nasty banks, okay? Just the BOAs, the Wells, the Chase, they're in your local markets and obviously, they're connected out to the big ones, right? And so these are basically, and what most people don't realize, these are trillion-dollar banks. These are banks that have way more money than you can possibly understand. But the reality is they're so far underneath, it's not funny. They have no ability to pay back the loans that they really have. They have loans and people are not getting loans in the same way. And then here's what's happening in the background. The reality is when NESARA hits, we go to a gold-backed currency, the banks, you cannot translate over all of those loans out to the large banks and actually even the small ones. Why? Because then you would be funding the large banks who actually did the central banking systems. Right? Why are you going to let those guys get funded again and keep going where they were going? Now, it's a type of bankruptcy that actually is occurring. Executive Order 13818 talks about if you have crimes against humanity, they're not going to let you transfer their money around. In essence, it was talking about banking first on a banking level. So the sickos are not going to be allowed to move around their money, and that includes the banks. So these big banks here that I'm showing you here are not going to have that capability. And you're going to go, wait, what are they going to do? Listen, your fund, if you got $1,000 in the bank, $100 in the bank, whatever you've got in the bank, whether it's any type of loan or any type of situation of checking, savings, whatever, okay? Don't ask me all the little things because they're all of them. They're all going to be translated in the QFS. Just like that. Just like when a bank goes into a new transfer, mode, they just, they move all your stuff into the new systems. Okay? Now, secondly, what will happen is that the loans don't have to be paid back. And we've talked about loans a little bit more, but I'll get into that into another episode with that too. But loans are not going to be paid back because they've done it under, lots of different ways that they've done this incorrectly. But what happens about the small ones? Now, if the big banks are going through a bankruptcy reorganization, that doesn't mean they're closing. That just means they're getting reorganized. That means they're going to get all the top layers lopped off. What about the small banks or the credit unions? Well, they weren't a part necessarily of the sick things that the big banks were doing. There might be. There's going to be people that you're going to find out about in your local area that were doing some ugly things. Of course, that person's going to be gone. Or that group might be gone, or that whole bank might be gone. But you don't just rip away a bank and then not let everyone get their money out, okay? There's going to be a transition time frame for that, okay? So the reality is, let's say, make up something. Let's say BOA, whether it's BOA or whether it's a small bank like this one of them decides to go out of business because they can't handle it. And by the way, this would happen in any other circumstance, whether we were in this unique circumstance or not. What would happen is they have to give their customers time to transfer their money out. this is actually, it's part of the FDIC, of the Fed agreements. That's why the Fed, when I say the Fed is dead, they are dead, but they have to have a transition time frame. That's why I believe that Judy Shelton is that woman who is going to have that transition part. And so we're going to see the banks make that transition, but they're going to inform you. You'll get an email, you'll get a letter, you might get a call, whatever. And just like I was talking about there, going, Scott, you need to come over and get your money out of the bank. We're moving to another bank. And then you can say, hey, we'll set up any other bank you want to go to. We'll help you in any other way, because that's what they'll have to do in that time frame, required to do. Maybe they'll have extra employees just to accomplish that transition. But guys, but most of the banks are going to still be around. Don't think that the banks are going away. They're not going away forever or any of that kind of silliness. We need the banks, but they won't have the power over you in the same way that they used to. So, trying to keep it short enough, trying to keep it short and sweet to give you some information. If you like what we did, please like, comment, and subscribe.